In Gloucester, Massachusetts, Ruby Rossi is the only hearing member of her family. Her parents, Frank and Jackie, and older brother Leo, are all culturally deaf. She assists with the family fishing business and plans to join it full-time after finishing high school. Ruby auditions for the school choir, run by Bernardo Villalobos, or Mr. V, but when she is called upon to sing, she panics and runs away. She later returns to Mr. V and explains that she was bullied for talking funny as a child. Mr. V accepts Ruby into the choir after hearing her beautiful voice and encourages her to be more confident. Mr. V pairs Ruby with Miles, a fellow student, for a duet at the upcoming choir recital. Their first performance goes poorly as they each prepare separately. Mr. V insists that they get together on their own to practice. Ruby invites Miles to her house to practice, but they are interrupted by Frank and Jackie loudly having sex in the next room over. Ruby later hears classmates in the cafeteria mocking the incidents behind her back. Miles apologizes for spreading the story, but she wants nothing to do with him. She eventually forgives him and they resume their practice while kindling a relationship. Meanwhile, Frank and Leo struggle to make ends meet with the fishing business as new fees and sanctions are imposed by the local board. At a board meeting, Frank stands and announces that he is starting his own company to get around the new restrictions and sell his fish on his own, inviting other local fishermen to join in. The family struggles to get the company off the ground, relying on Ruby to talk to people and spread the word. Mr. V encourages Ruby to auditions for Berklee College of Music and offers her private lessons to prepare. Ruby joins him for the lessons, but becomes increasingly busy helping her family with the business. Mr. V grows irritated with her constantly being late and making excuses, canceling their lessons. He chastises her for wasting his time and accuses her of not caring enough about music. While fishing one day, Frank and Leo are intercepted by the Coast Guard after failing to respond to ship horns and radio calls. They are fined and have their fishing licenses revoked for their negligence. They appeal and manage to get their license back on the condition that they have a hearing person on board with them at all times. Ruby announces to the family that she is foregoing college and will join the business full-time. Her parents are supportive, but Leo reacts angrily, insisting that they can manage their own problems without Ruby's help. Ruby's family attends her choir recital, and while they cannot hear her sing, they notice the positive reception from the audience around them. That night, Frank asks Ruby to sing a song for him while he feels her vocal cords. Growing emotional, the entire family then drives to Boston with Ruby for her Berklee audition. They are not supposed to enter the audition hall, but they sneak up to the balcony to watch anyway. Ruby is nervous at first, but gains confidence when she sees her family. She sings along with the song so they can understand what she is saying. Sometime later, Ruby is accepted to Berklee. She shares the news with her family and Mr. V, who are all excited for her, before asking Miles to visit her in Boston sometime. Meanwhile, the hearing worker in the family's fishing business have been learning sign language, allowing them to interpret for the family. Ruby's friend Gertie drives her to Boston for college as her family sees them off. Ruby signs "I love you" to them as they drive away. At first glance, you might think that writer-director Sean Heather's Coda is all about predictable beats you've seen countless times before. After all, it tells a pleasantly familiar coming-of-age tale, following a talented small-town girl of modest means with dreams to study music in a big city. There's an idealistic teacher, a winsome crush, moving rehearsal montages, a high-stakes audition, and naturally a family reluctant about their offspring's ambitions. Again, and only at first glance, you might think you already know everything about this feel-good recipe. Caring, boisterous, and adorned with the hugest of heart, Coda will prove you wrong. It's not that Heather doesn't embrace the aforesaid conventions for all their comforting worth. She does, but by twisting the formula and placing this recognizable story inside a new, perhaps even groundbreaking setting with such loving, acutely observed specificity. She pulls off nothing short of a heartwarming miracle with her film, the title of which is an acronym, Child of Deaf Adults, played by the exceptional Amelia Jones. The gifted young girl in question here happens to be one, navigating the intricacies of her identity, passions, and familial expectations, trying to reconcile them without hurting anyone's feeling, her own included. Admittedly, Coda is adapted from the French film La Famille Bélier, so the idea of it isn't entirely novel. What's new here, and it makes all the difference in the world, is the cast. While the family in the well-meaning original were played by the hearing cast members, they are all portrayed by real-life deaf performers in Heather's movie, a sensational group consisting of legendary Oscar winner Molly Matlin, scene-stealing Troy Corser, and Daniel Darrant, infusing her adaptation with a rare, inherent kind of authenticity. Jones is the 17-year-old Ruby, a hardworking high schooler in coastal Cape Anne's Gloucester, who habitually wakes up at the crack of dawn every day to help her family, her father Frank and brother Leo and mother Jackie, at their boat and newly formed fish sales business. Heather is quick to give us a real taste of Ruby's routine, accustomed to being her family's sign language proficient interpreter out in the world as the only hearing member of the Rossi clan. She spends her days translating every scenario imaginable two ways, at town meetings, at the doctor's office, one early instance of which plays for full-size laugh thanks to Cos's golden comedic chops, and at the boat where a hearing person must be present to notice the signals and coastal announcements. What Ruby has feels so balanced and awe-inspiring that it takes a minute to recognize just how exhausting the whole arrangement is for the young girl, even though she makes it look easy with maturity and a sense of responsibility beyond her years. For starters, she is all too aware of everything private about her parents, often including their medical conditions and to her riotous sex life. When the hearing world becomes cruel or belittling, she steps in, almost with protective instincts, always prioritizing them over herself, and Ruby joins the school choir and discovers a talent for singing. It throws off her balance and puts her at odds with her family, especially when she decides to apply to Boston's Berklee College of Music, adopting a rehearsal schedule that often clashes with her duties in the family business. Complicating the matters further is a fellow singer and romantic interest named Miles, a shy kid with a genuine admiration for Ruby. If there's one misstep here, it's how far Heather leans into the inspiring teacher trope with Eugenio Dabbitt's Bernardo Villalobos, a character that somehow transmits a sitcom artificiality in an otherwise earnest movie. Dabbett does what he can with a collection of cookie-cutter dialogue lines, but his scenes don't always land with the same honesty we see elsewhere in Coda. Still, this lapse in judgment feels minor and the movie so affecting, so in touch with its old-fashioned crowd-pleaser character, and plenty of other types of sincerity throughout Coda make up for it. From the way Heather portrays Cape Ann and the life around it through lived-in details, to how she honors the joys and anxieties of a working-class family with candor and humor, without ever making them or their deafness the butt of the joke. Most of all, she makes us see and believe in our bones that the Rossis are a real family with real chemistry, with real bones and trails of their own, both unique and universal just like any other family. What Ruby's chosen path unearths is the distinctiveness of those everyday battles. Would her sound-driven talent put a distance between Ruby and the rest of the Rossis? What would the world look like for the quartet if Ruby chose to live? Through a number of deeply generous and, to this critic, tear-jerking scenes, but especially a pair that play like each other's mirror images. Heather spells out the answer open-handedly. During one, all sound vanishes, while Ruby sings in front of her nearest and dearest, making us perceive her act from the point of view of the non-hearing. During the other, featuring a well-chosen track that might just melt even the frostest of hearts. Sound doesn't matter at all because Heather ensures that we see the boundless love that's there in their shared language.